Have you ever thought about what it would mean if someone tried to take your food away? Not just regulate it, not just tax it, but actually ban your cuisine. Make it illegal to cook the food your grandmother taught you. Make it illegal to speak the language she used to name it. That sounds extreme, right? But that's exactly what happened to Korea. I'm your host, Chef Murray, chef, global cuisine educator, and food historian with a lifelong passion for exploring global cuisines and the stories behind the food we eat. And this is Heritage Food Stories Season 2, Episode 1: How Japanese Colonization Tried to Erase Korean Food. When most of us think about colonization, our minds go to European powers like Great Britain, Spain, Portugal, and the Dutch, stripping the natural resources of countries across Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and South America. The last thing most of us would ever think about is one Asian country colonizing another, but that's exactly what happened. In 1910, Japan colonized Korea. And over the next 35 years, Japan didn't just want Korea's land and labor. They wanted to erase Korea itself, its history, its language, its culture, and yes, even its food. They went so far as to demonize kimchi. Let's get into it. To understand how Korea ended up under Japanese rule, we need to back it up a little. For a long time, Korea was known as the Hermit Kingdom, a country that deliberately kept its borders closed to outside influence. But that isolation couldn't last forever. Korea had historically existed under the protection of China, essentially as a tributary state. But then Japan defeated China in the First Sino-Japanese War in 1895. That shifted the balance of power in the region dramatically. 10 years later, Japanese defeated Russia in the Russo-Japanese War of 1905. And that victory sent a message to the entire world that Japan was now a major imperial power. What was the result for Korea? Japan declared Korea a protectorate in 1905. And then, on August 22nd, 1910, Japan formally annexed Korea, absorbing it into the Japanese Empire entirely. Koreans refer to this period simply as the Dark Time. And from everything we know, that name was earned. Human rights and civil rights were stripped away from its citizens overnight. So, what was life like under the Japanese rule during the dark time? The moment annexation was official, Korea was placed under brutal military rule. Basic rights, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, disappeared overnight. But Japan's goals went far beyond political control. They wanted to redefine Korea entirely, to develop it for Japanese benefit. That meant building transportation infrastructure, transferring land ownership to Japanese nationals, and exporting Korea's natural resources and labor back to Japan. Think about this for a second. By the 1930s, half of Korea's rice production was being exported to Japan. Half! Yet Korean people were starving in their own country. And it wasn't just economic exploitation. Japan set out to systematically dismantle Korean identity. Korean Christians and Buddhists were forced to perform Shinto rituals, the state religion of Japan. Even the Korean currency was eradicated. If any of this is starting to sound familiar, it's because the structure of oppression has a way of repeating itself across history. The inequities Koreans lived under in education, in salaries, in land ownership, in legal standing were strikingly similar to what Black Americans experienced under the Jim Crow laws. Different place, different time, same playbook. But the Koreans did not simply accept this, not even close. The fire for resistance was always there, but intensified after the death of Korean Emperor Gojong in early 1919. There were widespread rumors that he had been poisoned by the Japanese, and whether that's true or not, his death became the catalyst. On March 1st, 1919, thousands of Koreans took to the streets in a nationwide uprising now known as the March 1st movement, or Samil. Peaceful protests broke out across the country. The movement was partially inspired by U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, whose famous speech on the self-determination of nations had given independence movements around the world a sense of moral footing. The protesters were peaceful. They carried declarations of independence, they marched, they sang. The Japanese did not respond in kind. Their response was immediate and brutal. In one of the most horrifying incidents of the entire colonial period, Japanese forces locked protesters inside a church in the village of Jamri and burned it to the ground. When the dust settled on the years of protest that followed, the toll was staggering. 7,000 Koreans killed, 15,000 wounded, 56,000 arrested. Now, I want to be transparent about something here. Japanese official records will give you totally different numbers, but I trust the records of the colonized over the colonizers. That's just where I stand. Out of the ashes of the March 1st movement, the Korean Provisional Government was established in Shanghai, China, in 1919. With China as an ally, Koreans set up an exile government that would continue to operate until 1948. Now, after a major student demonstration in 1929, Japanese military rule got even tighter. And then after the Second Sino-Japanese War began in 1937, Japan launched what can only be described as a systematic campaign to destroy Korea as a nation. Not just control it, but destroy it, culturally annihilate it. They instituted new laws to eradicate Korean culture. The Korean language was officially banned. Schools were only permitted to teach in Japanese. Korean history was eliminated from school curricula entirely. Koreans were forced to take Japanese names, a policy called soshikaime, effectively erasing family lineage and cultural identity in a single bureaucratic stroke. More than 75,000 Korean cultural artifacts were destroyed or shipped off to Japan. And yes, even kimchi was demonized. Traditional Korean foods were targeted as part of this larger effort to stamp out Korean identity. Food, as I talk about on the show all the time, is never just food. It is memory, identity, family, and resistance. The Japanese understood that, which is exactly why they tried to remove it. Their biggest mistake was that they underestimated memory and mothers. You can ban a language in schools, but you cannot ban a mother's voice at home. In kitchens across Korea, behind closed doors and in quiet homes, Korean mothers kept the culture alive. They taught their children Korean. They cooked Korean food. They passed down stories, recipes, and history that no colonial decree could reach. The mothers did not need school books to teach their children Korean history, Korean recipes, and Korean culture. Culture kept in private when it cannot be kept in public is still culture. It is still resistance. The Korean resistance wasn't only happening at home and in kitchens, it was also organized militarily. On September 17th, 1940, the Korean Liberation Army was formally established. And on December 9th, 1941, just 2 days after Pearl Harbor, Korea officially declared war on Japan and Germany. Koreans were fighting on multiple fronts. Some were fighting for liberation, others were being forced to fight for their oppressors because Japan forced Koreans into the Japanese military. And in one of the most devastating chapters of this entire period, around 200,000 Korean and Chinese women were forced into sexual slavery as so-called comfort women for the Japanese military. These were not footnotes in history. These were real women. Their stories are still being told, still being fought over politically, and still not fully acknowledged. Liberation finally came on August 15th, 1945, when Japan surrendered at the end of World War II. Koreans called this day Gwangbokjeol, the Day of the Restoration of Light. After liberation, the US occupied the South and the Soviet Union occupied the North. As we all know, that division would eventually lead to the Korean War, but that is a whole other episode. The wounds of Japanese colonization are not ancient history for Koreans. They are still raw. The issue of comfort women remains a point of deep tension between Korea and Japan to this day. The cultural artifacts that were taken have not all been returned. And for many Korean families, this period of the dark time is still something spoken about with real grief. But here's the thing about a culture that survives being nearly erased. It comes back fierce. The Japanese tried to get Koreans to forget who they were. They banned their language, they banned their history, they banned their food, and it didn't work. Because memories cannot be legislated out of existence, especially when they live in the hands of people who cook. Today, Korean culture is one of the most globally recognized and celebrated in the world. We're talking about K-dramas that have taken over Netflix, Korean skincare that has completely disrupted the beauty industry, and Korean food that has become internationally beloved. So let's talk about the food, because that's what we're here for. Korean cuisine is deeply rooted in fermentation, bold flavors, communal eating, and balance. Kimchi, that fermented spiced vegetable dish that Japan once tried to ban, is now one of the most recognized fermented foods in the world, celebrated for both its incredible flavor and its gut health benefits. Bibimbap, with its beautiful arrangement of rice, vegetables, and egg in a stone bowl, is on menus from Seoul to Sao Paulo. Korean barbecue has become a global social experience. The communal grill at the center of the table is a whole vibe. Japchae, those silky glass noodles stir-fried with vegetables and sesame, show up at Korean celebrations and increasingly on restaurant menus worldwide. And then there's Korean fried chicken, which has a fun little footnote worth mentioning. That ultra crispy double fry technique was actually influenced by Black American GI soldiers stationed in Korea during the Korean War. Food history is always moving, always borrowing, always in conversation across cultures. Okay, a few more Korean dishes I love that you can find on my website are hugimjajuk, a sweet sesame seed pudding, bindatok, also known as nokdujian, mung bean pancakes that are crispy on the outside and savory all the way through with just the right amount of spice, and sujanggwa, a spiced persimmon punch with cinnamon and ginger that I think more people need in their lives. You're probably used to tasting this at the end of your meal in Korean restaurants. You can watch me make sujanggwa and bindatok in videos linked in the show notes. Additionally, all these recipes will be linked in the show notes. Now, what strikes me most about this history and why I wanted to open season 2 of Heritage Food Stories with it is how clearly it shows that food is never just food. When colonizers want to destroy a culture, they go after its language, its history, and its food, because those are the things that carry identity forward. Those are the things that remind people who they are, where they come from, and what they belong to. And when communities survive colonization, when they keep cooking the food that was banned, keep speaking the language that was forbidden, keep telling the stories that were erased from the curriculum, that is not just survival. That is one of the most powerful forms of resistance there is. Korean food survived. Korean culture survived. And today it thrives. I hope this episode gave you something to think about the next time you sit down to a bowl of bibimbap or reach for that jar of kimchi in your fridge. I'm Chef Mireille, and this has been Heritage Food Stories. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode. You can find all the recipes mentioned today at globalkitchentravels.com. The links are in the show notes again. I've also included some of my favorite Korean cookbooks. Until next time, keep cooking, keep curious, and keep honoring the stories behind the food.